All right, guys, let's get right into it. This is why most men stop being dangerous after their 20s. This is a full longevity guide to staying capable, athletic, and vital for life. Now, we live in an interesting time, guys. We live in a time where we have more resources than ever before. We have all the knowledge, the products, the tools to stay healthy, jacked, and athletic for longer than any of our ancestors, right? And despite having all these tools, we also live in a time where modernism and sedentarism are at an all time high. And in my 7 years in the fitness industry, I've noticed this contradiction. Despite having all these resources, we also live in a time where men are becoming more fragile, more injury prone, low energy, and less vital, even in their 20s, guys. Right? I've trained so many men, I've taken so many clients on, and they'd be like 27, 28. And in previous generations, 27, 28 was supposed to be your prime. There are so many men that I've trained over the years, 27, 28, 29, early 30s, that literally can't do the most basic physical and athletic things, even like men twice their age could do literally 50 years ago. And what I've realized is this isn't just a fitness problem. This is men slowly over time and generations losing capability, losing vitality, and losing overall his identity in this day and age of just modernism. And most of the time, men just don't see it happening. I think one of the biggest reasons for this is the world that we live in right now. And obviously, we have more resources than ever, but there's also negative aspects to this modern world. And the world works against you by default, right? The stress, the modern lifestyle, all the toxic products, the shitty food, the disconnection, it all works against you quietly. And modern life is designed to push you towards convenience and weakness. And I think over these past couple of decades, this has kind of had a detrimental effect on men and their physical capabilities. And the raw reality of how I see it, this is kind of the modern decline loop that 90% of men face today. Okay, most men, they have existential stress from a sedentary career. They don't like what they do. They feel like they're called to do more. They feel like they almost become emasculated by their career and just corporate America and all that shit in general. Now this elevates their cortisol because you don't like what you're doing and it disrupts your sleep. This leads to a lack of energy and mental fatigue. And this causes you to make bad decisions when it comes to food and things that you put on your body, right? You end up door dashing shit, whatever. This results in poor nutrition, and this messes up your hormones, and that hormonal decline causes you to be always inflamed, always feeling like shit, so you don't want to do any physical activity, right? And then that in turn causes you to gain weight, causes you to gain body fat, and then you look yourself in the mirror, wonder what the fuck happened, and you become less confident and less willing to put yourself out there in the world. And this cycle just continues to go on and on again. And not only that, not only is the world working against you, you're also surrounded by all these negative attitudes from all these negative people. How many times have you heard at work or around people in your life, people talking about, oh, when you're 30, you're gonna feel it. When I turned 30, I started slowing down. People will say dogmatic statements like this, but you have to realize they have no real basis in anything. Your body is not on a predetermined decline schedule. But most men just accept this negative energy from, society and just live in this paradigm for the rest of their lives. And I think people just say blind statements like this because like the concept of physical longevity is just not talked about in mainstream fitness enough. Like people just, go to the gym to look good for the summer, but no one really, dives deep into the concept of, maintaining athletic qualities for a lifetime, being well into your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and, maintaining qualities. Not only that, but excelling through these things. Not many people talk about this side of fitness because it doesn't really sell, right? It's a long-term approach. So that's why I want to kind of make this video a complete guide to staying capable for a long time. Here's one truth that you have to understand about keeping these qualities and staying dangerous for a lifetime. What you have to realize is genetics carry you through your 20s. Okay, when you're in your teens and your 20s, Genetics play a major role because you haven't had that much time to really train yet. Most men start training, maybe in their late teens. So in your 20s and your teens, you haven't put in that much work for training to really kick in and really give those long-term effects. So the effect of genetics is very prevalent in your teens and your early 20s. Okay, so a lot of people just kind of get by just due to good genetics. Okay, but after you kind of pass that late 20 mark, the same formula won't work. You have to change your perspective on training. Okay, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. Okay, guys, I was never a genetically gifted, athlete as a kid. I was always the weak kid growing up. I still remember the most genetically gifted guys from high school. A lot of them now, 10 years later after high school, 15 years later, they're complete shells in themselves because they relied on their genetics early. And when that one thing just kind of stopped working, when father time kind of started winning, they had nothing left. And these guys with good genetics, a lot of the times, they never really had to work hard to develop things. So they don't really know the rules on how the body adapts and how it operates. And if you don't know the rules, you won't even know you're losing. So I'm going to give you guys the truth about performance and aging. Okay. Here is the thing. With all the resources and knowledge out there nowadays, it's absolutely possible to not only maintain athletic qualities, but excel well into your later years. A lot of people just have this preconceived notion that, my mid-20s are going to be my prime, my 30s and my 40s, I'm going to decline. Yes, but in today's day and age, with all the knowledge, there is a lot you can do to not only counter that, but actually reverse that effect. Every day I'm reminded on social media of the feats that are possible way after your so-called prime, even while natural. I know a lot of individuals, I follow a lot of people that are 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, doing amazing. So it definitely is possible. But here's what you need to understand for you to keep this capability for a lifetime. You have to be realistic and you have to know your limitations and what you actually have power over. Obviously, father time is going to be undefeated. You can't really reverse aging. But you need to understand, what your limitations are as you age and what you actually have control over. If you know the game that you're playing and what you're working with, you can actually work with it and actually, make gains well into your later years. But most people live in the dark. They live in ignorance. They don't know what's possible because they subscribe to all these negative beliefs around them. They don't know what the human body is truly capable of, and they just submit to all this misinformation, and that limits them for the rest of their lives. So in this video, I'm going to break down how not to only maintain your strength, body composition, power, reflexes, coordination, and durability as you age, but actually excel as you get older. Okay, I honestly think it's just embarrassing when I hear men in their late 20s, guys, or even early 30s complaining that, it's not the same as it was when I was 18 or 20. Guys, it's not that your body can't keep up with the demands as you age. It's just that most men never actually built any real qualities before they hit 30, so they arrive unprepared. And then they mistake being unprepared for being old, right? They chalk it up to age, accept the lesser version of themselves, and stop pushing altogether, right? And then this feeds back into that negative feedback loop. Yes, your body has a propensity to slow down in muscle growth, speed, power, coordination, and durability. And in today's climate, that change is accelerated. But that does not mean you have to be operating at low levels of these things. And, here is the paradox that nobody talks about. Yes, at 30, you will slow down in certain aspects, right? If you're comparing a 30-year-old to a 20-year-old, the 20-year-old has greater potential, right? And what I'm trying to say is, if a 30-year-old and a 20-year-old start the same journey at the same time, the 20-year-old will obviously have a greater propensity and potential. But here is what the 30-year-old has over the 20-year-old, and nobody acknowledges this advantage. They only focus on the negatives of aging, right? If the 30-year-old was training properly, he had 10 years to stack qualities. 10 years of building body composition, strength, power, and every other quality. That is a massive head start that people just completely overlooked. An untrained 20-year-old versus an untrained 30-year-old, the untrained 20-year-old is superior. But a well-trained 30-year-old that had 10 years to stack qualities versus a relatively newly trained 20-year-old, the 30-year-old would completely wash the 20-year-old. Right? There are two aspects of development. There's nature and nurture. Nature is all powerful. We will all age. We will all die someday. These are things we have to accept. But people don't consider how powerful the nurture side of the equation actually is. I believe you can excel into physical fitness into your 50s naturally, but only if you build qualities. You have to start stacking your training so that each day builds upon the last. Not only that, but you have to factor in aging and how that changes the process in certain ways and modify the game plan as you get older. And here's the thing, this is the reason why a lot of people feel like shit, at 30. Most people don't train, they work out. They sweat, they feel good just to justify, oh, I want to eat this donut later, so I'm going to burn a couple calories. There's no method, no progression. There's one easy day, one hard day. They shoot in the dark and they just kind of go like this. And so they don't really build anything. They go into their 30s, they haven't had anything to build. They don't have anything to show for it. They don't have any qualities stacked up. But if you actually train and stack qualities, right, build qualities, progress systematically, stack each day upon the last, actually build something over a long period of time, and you do this for the next couple decades, you're going to go into your 40s, even 50s, aging very well and still maintaining a lot of your capability. So in order for you to excel physically and literally operate at your prime independent of age, you need to know two things. You need to really internalize these two things. How aging past your mid-20s affects different qualities. Obviously, there's going to be some detriments to aging. You have to just be aware of these things, be conscious of these things. And once you understand that, now you have the tools to modify your training around these aging effects while still promoting progression. So that's the only two things you need to know. So throughout this video, I'm going to be covering the main specific qualities and breaking down what exactly changes about each one as you get older and how to build and maintain them depending on where you're at in life. Okay, so the first quality I'm going to start with is going to be vitality. So what do I mean by vitality? What I mean is your overall hormonal health, energy, and drive as a man. Now, this is your most foundational factor in longevity. It's not really a physical quality, but it governs everything from how your body looks to your overall quality of life. So I think it's important that we start here. And for most men who come to me, I find that this is literally the root of all of their problems when it comes to fitness. Okay, so what does the decline actually look like as you age? Okay, so as you get older, right, there's an average of 1 to 2% drop in testosterone per year after the age of 30, right? So let's say if you have a testosterone level of 630 in your 30s, you're going to see that decade after decade, it's just going to go down incrementally. And, this is just a natural consequence of getting older. But here's another statistic that I find actually more interesting. We have 20 to 30% less testosterone than your father at the same age. That means generationally, testosterone has been going down. And that could be reflected in this graph right here, right? There was a study here. They assessed the testosterone levels of men in 1987 to 89. As you can see, it was 520. And in 2002 and 2004, it's 450. So a noticeable drop just a couple of years, a couple of decades after. And, right, you can only imagine what it looks like in 2025. It's probably all the way down here, right? So testosterone is dropping, and it's natural for testosterone to drop with age. But as you can see, generationally, it's been dropping as well. So what does testosterone actually govern? Okay, testosterone affects mood, cognition, metabolism, immune function, bone mineral density, cardiovascular health, sexual function, right? This isn't just a fitness metric, it's your overall health. That's why we're starting with this right here. And this is the one thing that men need to get a handle on, and this is the reason why a lot of men struggle with this, is the testosterone versus cortisol imbalance, okay? So there's two opposing forces, right? Testosterone is anabolic. It builds and maintains tissue. Cortisol breaks it down. And so both of these forces are very necessary, right? Cortisol is very necessary as well. There's such a thing as good stress. But what I find in today's men is that this balance is thrown off. And this balance is thrown off mainly because of chronic stress, poor sleep, and just overall disconnection from the present. And if you get this imbalance wrong, it's going to be biochemically working against every physical quality we're about to cover, making you fight an uphill battle. That's why it's so imperative that we start with this, right? And this is the real root right here. Fitness is just surface level. The deep underlying cause to low vitality is going to be your lifestyle. And what is lifestyle? Lifestyle is literally how you live your life, okay? And this goes from your thoughts and beliefs, guys, right? Your thoughts affects the way you see things, your perception. Your perception affects your decision making. Your decision making affects your actions, and that affects your habits, and that affects who you are right now, right? So lifestyle is not just your morning routine and things like this. When I say lifestyle, I'm talking about a very holistic chain of different things. And it all starts with your thoughts and beliefs. Most men, they just jump straight into a workout routine without addressing this complex chain, which I call your lifestyle first. Then they wonder what goes wrong. So you have to get your lifestyle right first, guys. This is the first step. And with lifestyle, the first layer is thoughts and beliefs. So I think it's very important to just instill the right thoughts and beliefs into your mind first. So these are a couple thoughts and beliefs to kind of set the groundworks so that you can stay capable for a lifetime. So a couple things that you really have to get through to your mind, and a couple laws that you have to live by. Okay, so number one is you have to start craving and start chasing delayed gratification. Be very cautious about convenience. We live in a day and age where everything can be handed to you in the blink of an eye, the snap of a finger. Every time you just, give into modernism, you take the easy path, you signal to your body and your mind that comfort is the priority. And too much comfort, too much modernism compounds against you over years, and it makes you soft. Number two is you will have to prioritize health over everything, okay? We live in a day and age right now where men, they prioritize looking good, status, material possessions, short-term pleasures. These things are nothing compared to a healthy, functioning body. Material stuff, status, none of these things really give you any real benefit, guys. You have to start prioritizing your health and vitality over all these things. And the third little mental nugget is you have to prioritize running on your time, not others, right? And you can't do this fully in today's society because, a lot of us, we have work, we have responsibilities. We obviously have to respond to the day, right? But try to run on your own timing rather than being constantly dictated by the external. Set aside time to take control, right? Set aside your mornings, set aside your evenings. Say no more. Establish clear boundaries, right? And this is really the first step to reducing chronic cortisol. Now, these are some thoughts that you want to instill into your mind to eventually work up the chain that we discussed earlier and fix your lifestyle. Here are some more actionable tips that you want to do to really prioritize your vitality. Okay, so first is you want to sleep max. Set aside evenings for real rest, not just sleep. Give your nervous system a break. Spend time with yourself or your family. I've noticed the importance of this the older that I get. I used to be that guy that, I work till morning till night. But now in the evenings right now, I just try to shut off because you got to prioritize your well-being as a man, right? That's number one. Number two is minimalist max, okay? Stay away from a lot of these synthetic and toxic products. They're designed to be convenient, but they're horrible for your body and your hormones. I'm talking about your Tide Pods, your synthetic fragrances, your cheap processed food. Try to be as minimal as you can, right? In this regards to, things that you put on your body, things that you consume. Number three is real max. Eat whole foods. That's it. Not complex, right? You're not drinking all this, all these meal replacements and all these things, processed foods. Just keep it real. Just try to simplify it as most as you can. And then the last is Neanderthal max. You gotta just live like a caveman sometimes, bro. Stop being like this metropolitan guy that's, just like, I see this a lot nowadays, especially with, a lot of the men in the cities, is like, Yeah, it's cool to live in a city, but I think the city makes you soft as well. Stop overreacting to physical discomfort. Stop being so soft. Stop like, right? You can take the stairs. You can, right? So just like think like a caveman sometimes. Walk to the grocery store. Go outside. Go barefoot, right? It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay. It's okay to just be a Neanderthal sometimes. Don't give in to modern life softness by default. Remember, you are a man first, not your job, not your title, not your possessions. You sleep, you eat, you have urges. Prioritize what you actually are. Now, the second quality that we're going to get into is your body composition and muscle mass. Now, this is the second most foundational layer to staying dangerous and capable as you age. Now, most body composition decline that you see in individuals, when they hit 30, 40, where they gain fat, they lose muscle, it's largely a choice. It's not a consequence of aging directly. And I'm going to break down exactly why that is. But before we get into that, we have to understand what happens with our body fat as we age, right? So there's two types of body fat, guys. There's subcutaneous fat, which is fat that's really on the surface. It's right underneath the skin. It's easier to get rid of. It's generally considered metabolically neutral or beneficial, right? As we know, most men, we need a certain degree of body fat to retain hormonal function, right? So this fat is okay. Now, the second type of fat is visceral fat. This is the dangerous kind. This is the fat that's like literally integrated within you. It's fat that's very under the surface. It's around your organs. It tanks testosterone. It causes insulin resistance, and it drives a lot of metabolic disease. This is the dangerous kind of fat. This is what happens to your fat as you age. As you age, fat preferentially accumulates as visceral fat while subcutaneous fat decreases, right? And like we said, visceral fat is negatively associated with testosterone. So basically, as you age, the fat distribution directly suppresses your hormonal environment on top of everything else that's going on as you age, okay? So as you can see in this graph here, right, a man in his 20s, about 18% of the body fat that he possesses is visceral fat, and the rest is subcutaneous fat. Decade by decade, you're going to see that proportionally more of his body fat is going to be geared towards visceral fat, right? So this is what happens to your body fat as you age. You have to understand this. Let's talk about metabolism, okay? A lot of men say, oh, when I hit 30, I could eat that when I was 18, but, not anymore. My metabolism slowed down. Is this true? What does this actually mean? So there's a study right here, and what it actually found was that metabolism in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s was actually the most stable of any life stage. Basically, your metabolism doesn't change much when you go from 20 to 60. And this is literally a direct quote from the study author. He said, people will say, oh, when I hit my 30, my metabolism fell apart. We don't see any evidence of that. So if your metabolism is stable from 20 to 60, why is the reason that you see all these men when they get into the later 20s, 30s, 40s, they accumulate all this body fat out of nowhere? Now, this is the real driver of fat gain, okay? The real driver of fat gain is losing muscle mass, okay? We all know that muscle mass is an expensive organ to keep, right? It speeds up your metabolism. So if you lose muscle, you will indirectly have a slower metabolism. The fat gain, right, most of it, which is visceral fat, comes from eating more, right? You becoming an adult, you kind of giving into sedentarism, modernism, moving less, and also losing the muscle that was driving your calorie burn. So it's not the fact that your metabolism slowed down just because you age. That's bullshit. The real reason is, right, the effects of modern life. You move less, you become lazy, you become more gluttonous, and at the same time, you lose muscle mass. Now, what exactly happens with muscle mass as you get older, okay? You're going to see an average of a 1% loss of muscle loss per year from middle age, okay? And this is another important statistic here. We have this thing called anabolic resistance, okay? So basically what it is saying that even 2 weeks of no training, of reduced activity, will trigger you to lose the muscle that you have gained and make it harder for you to maintain that muscle mass, okay? So this is what it actually looks like in a graph here. So you're going to see this untrained individual and a trained individual. For the untrained individual, that muscle mass decline is very sharp because not only are you working against your age, right? As you age every year, you're going to lose 1% of muscle mass. This individual doesn't train at all. So he's not putting in any effort to even maintain the muscle mass that he has. You're going to see that, it just goes down at a very steep angle. Whereas the trained individual, obviously, there is going to be a degree of muscle loss as you age. It's inevitable, but you can do quite a lot to slow down that gain. And you're going to see if you're a trained individual, even when you're like 87, you're still going to be better off than, the individual in his 40s that's untrained, right? So as you can see, guys, muscle mass is probably the most important thing in retaining your body composition. Most men lose muscle, which in turn slows down their metabolism, which in turn allows them to gain all this visceral fat, and that visceral fat tanks their hormones, and it just goes into a negative feedback loop, right? So the biggest thing that actually changes with gaining and maintaining muscle mass as you get older is this thing called anabolic resistance. Now, basically what anabolic resistance is as you get older, you have a blunted response to the fundamental cues of physical activity and nutrition. Okay, basically, the potency of your workouts will decrease as you get older. And now this is something that you have to internalize and work with. Basically, the older you are, the less anabolic stimulus you get from the same training. That's why teens make fast progress, because they have a lot of anabolic potency. They're relatively young, right? But when you get older, that same workout when you're doing as a teen, it's going to be hard to get those same effects as you once did when you were younger. Now, why does anabolic resistance increase as you get older? Obviously, it has a lot to do with age, but I think the biggest reason why is inactivity, right? It's not just the chronological age that just suppresses your anabolic potential, but it's the inactivity. Inactivity causes anabolic resistance independent of aging. Okay, this means that physical qualities fade much faster as you get older if you ease off. Okay, most people have it backwards. They train more when they're young and they fall off as they age, but it should actually be the opposite. When you're young, you don't need that much stimulus to make gains and make progress. As you get older, you have a higher degree of anabolic resistance. It's harder to actually get pulled on muscle. So as you get older, you actually need to be training more frequently and more consistently. Okay, so 2 ways to overcome this anabolic resistance as you get older. Number 1 is you need a bigger anabolic dose. So basically, you just need to increase your protein intake as you get older. When you're a younger individual, you can still put on a lot of muscle mass without prioritizing protein as long as you get, a decent amount in. But as you get older and, you have a higher degree of muscle turnover rate and, it's just harder to put on muscle, you must at least eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I think that's a good general rule, right? It's very simple. So you need a bigger anabolic dose. The second way to kind of restore anabolic sensitivity as you get older is turning up the frequency. Okay, so acute bouts of exercise restore the ability to stimulate muscle mass. Okay, so when you're younger, you can kind of just work out and just do whatever and make gains. As you get older and you have less anabolic potency, you have to kind of be more smart about programming and you have to treat training more like a job. Okay, this doesn't necessarily mean train harder, but you have to train more consistently, more intentionally, and more frequently. Now, this is probably the biggest reason why when men hit 30, they just lose all their muscle mass. It's because they do this bro split, okay? And don't get me wrong, I did the bro split once when I was, in my teens and my early 20s. But if your goal is to stay dangerous and capable for a lifetime, the bro split is not it. And I'm going to tell you exactly why that is. But this is like the default split for a lot of people because they don't know any better. But here's the thing about the bro split. In your teens and your 20s, everything is anabolic. So you can get away with, doing a chest, back, legs, arms, shoulders type split. Because, when you're young, you can literally do anything. You have such a high degree of anabolic potential that, anything will stimulate gains. But once you get past like 30, once you have a real job, responsibilities, and, your anabolic potency decreases, think about what a bro split is. You're hitting each muscle group just 1 time per week. And a lot of individuals, the bro split looks like this. This is just me being real. A lot of individuals that do the bro split, this is what it looks like. They do 1 week, they go chest, back, arms, shoulders, legs. That next week, maybe something came up on Thursday and Friday, they skip shoulders and legs. And instead of hitting these workouts at the beginning of the week, they just cycle back and they just go chest, back, arms. And then now they're only hitting chest, back, and arms. Like, you guys see the problem of the bro split. The stimulus is too infrequent to combat age-related protein turnover, and also it's too inconsistent to drive adaptation. What you have to understand about the bro split is, like, it was designed for younger individuals. It was designed for the kid that's 18 to, like, in his early 20s, where they have a high degree of anabolic potency. They could blast their arms, blast their chest, and still recover from it. Or it was designed for individuals on gear, right? It was popularized in the bodybuilding era, where a lot of guys were taking supplements, right? Taking testosterone and things like that. So the bro split for the average man in his 30s with, like, real responsibilities, job, all that, it's just too infrequent and it's just too inconsistent. So you need a split that hits all muscle groups more frequently, gives the body a more global training effect, and maintains consistent stimulus week to week, right? As you get older, right, we covered that you have a higher degree of muscle turnover rate. So you have to be hitting muscle groups more frequently. You can't just have one chest day when you're 40, 50 years old. You're going to start losing muscle because that turnover rate gets higher and higher as you get older. So you have to do splits that are more consistent and give more opportunities for you to train each muscle group more frequently. Okay, so these are a couple of my favorite ones. Number one is like push-pull legs. This one's okay. It's all right. The only drawback is it's a 6-day week, guys. It's a long training week. So you got push-pull legs, push-pull legs. I think this is a great one if you have a handle on managing the intensity and volume week by week. It's very difficult to train 6 days a week. So if you have a good touch with your body and just know when you're overdoing it, right? It could be a good split. What I like about it is it gives each muscle group, right? You're training each muscle group 2 times per week, right? And that is very important to counter that muscle turnover rate, right? Another split I really like is that full body. Now, this one's a very versatile split. You can do it anywhere from 3 to 6 days per week. What I really like for this type of split is that you train each muscle group pretty much every day. So you're really counteracting that muscle turnover rate, right? So it's really good, I think, for men more so trying to maintain rather than, trying to push past plateaus. The only drawback of this one is you have to be selective about the exercise choice because you can only do about 1 exercise per day per muscle group, right? So you have to be very selective about the exercises you choose. This is probably my favorite one right here is upper and lower. Now, what I like about upper and lower is you can train it from 4 to 6 days a week. Now, what I like about it is you train each muscle group 2 times a week, right? You do 2 upper days, 2 lower days, but it also gives a lot of room to do other things, right? You can do another upper body day if that's more of a focus for you. You can, mix in aerobic work and active hobbies, right? So to me, upper or lower is probably the best. But what you're going to notice with all these splits, right? You're not training 1 muscle group per day. You're accounting for that anabolic resistance. You're accounting for that muscle turnover rate, and you're training each muscle group more frequently while still being able to push if you do one of these 3 splits. If you guys want a free upper lower split, just find me on IG, shoot me a message, and then I'll send that over your way. The next quality that we're going to talk about is strength. Now, what is strength? Strength is how much force you can apply to external objects, how much you can command your body with your nervous system to move external objects. Now, it's a signal of vitality, power, and it's closely linked to muscle mass, which we just discussed. Now, most importantly, I think this is the most important thing about strength as you age. Strength is actually the most resilient physical quality. It doesn't actually change that much as you get older. It declines very gradually compared to everything else. And now when I say strength is a very resilient quality, I'm talking about a specific type of strength. And it's really, really important to differentiate the 2 different types of strength and, what aging does to each of these. Okay, so there's 2 types of strength really. There's that slow maximal grinding strength. Think about that isometric strength. Think about positional strength, staying in a position, right? Heavy, slow, compound force expression. This is what a lot of people call that old man strength, right? This is the type of strength where there's a gradual build up and you gradually build into a very high peak. This type of strength is very resilient as you age. And, actually, you can actually excel as you get older as well. This type of strength holds up very well with age. The strength that declines is strength at high velocity. This is that explosive force expression. So you don't get a lot of time to build up to a high force peak. You just kind of have to produce force fast. And this is more that strength that's used with speed, right? And this type of strength declines a lot faster. This is more explosiveness and power, which I'm going to get into the next section. But my point is, the type of strength that really holds up is that slow maximal grinding strength, right? And I'm sure a lot of you guys just see from observational data, there is such a thing as old man strength, okay? And a really good example I like to use with this is like older grapplers. So if you do like wrestle an older guy or roll with an older guy, you're going to notice that they still have that strength when it comes to staying in a position or, having that squeeze, right? They have a lot of strength when it comes to just that static strength. But where they lack is, and when they lose with age, is more that dynamic, explosive output, right? But old man strength is definitely real, okay? This type of slow maximal grinding strength is very resilient, okay? And you can not only maintain it as you get older, but you can actually exceed a lot of your younger counterparts because this quality doesn't really drop. So you just have time to build it up over the years, okay? But there obviously is a small degree of strength loss as you get older, as with everything as you age. Like, this is the reasons why you lose strength. Number one is muscle loss, okay? The majority of strength loss as you get older can be accounted for decreased muscle mass. Like I covered in the earlier section, right? As you get older, you just have a propensity to lose muscle mass. Muscle generates force. If you lose muscle, you're going to generate less force. But if you do a good job of maintaining muscle mass, right, you're not going to lose that much strength. And then the second reason why a lot of men lose strength is neural decline, okay? Aging reduces your ability to drive from the brain to your motor neurons. So the nervous system gets less efficient at fully switching the muscle on. This means that neural adaptations, right, your ability to use your nervous system and drive the muscles in your body is just as important as hypertrophy when it comes to maintaining strength over your lifetime. So this is how to combat these two mechanisms of strength loss. The first is you have to train with intent. So a lot of the reason why men lose strength is they lose the ability of the nervous system to drive and command their body. So you have to train this quality. You have to do heavy reps. You have to train with maximal intent, heavy loads. And instead of just chasing fatigue and reps, you have to exercise this quality of moving heavy weight, right? And commanding your nervous system to move that weight. This goes into my second point. You have to chase the right type of fatigue when it comes to maintaining strength levels. So a lot of men just train with lighter weights and they kind of just go to failure. But you have to train in another way. Okay, so think about like a bicep curl to muscular failure. The substrate buildup, the pump, right? And you get to like rep 20 and it's like, oh, you failed because not necessarily because the weight was too heavy, but because your muscle, the local muscle got tired. That is great for training for, muscle hypertrophy and other things. But when it comes to training strength, you need a different type of stimulus. So you need to do more things like a back squat where you can only grind out 2 heavy reps. And the reason you failed was not because your muscles got tired, right? You only did 2 reps, but simply because your nervous system couldn't command the body to pick up that heavy weight. You see those 2 different types of fatigue? You have to prioritize the second one when it comes to developing and maintaining strength over your lifetime. And another point is I want to just remind you guys, the ceiling is a lot higher than you think, okay? With strength in particular, maximal strength in older athletes, and I've seen it not only from the data, but from just observational experience, exceeds that of healthy, moderately trained young individuals. Strength is something that is very dependent on the nurture side. It's very dependent on training, not so much of your age. So an older athlete with consistent training is way stronger than the intermediate 20-year-old. So the decline of strength is more about disuse and improper training than an inevitable biological wall. So keep that in mind. Your strength can, definitely maintain and even increase as you get older. Now, how do you actually train strength? full body compound movements at 80% of your 1 rep max. And I always say this for developing strength, always prioritize free weights over machines. The reason why is that free weight movements demand more muscular coordination, and also it just applies a little bit more of a survival level adaptive stimulus. What do I mean by that, guys? So when you're trying to develop strength, when you're trying to develop this quality of using your nervous system to drive and really maximally recruit your body, you need to apply a stimulus for your body to gain this adaptation, right? The body adapts to threats, right? Like the reason why you adapt, it's a survival trait, okay? Like basically the essence of why you get stronger in the gym, guys, is like, okay, if you lift a weight and, it was very difficult for you, your body's like, okay, I need to get stronger so that, next time I do this, I don't get crushed. That's really the essence of adaptation. So when you train with free weights, where there is a cost of failure, there are some stakes. You could get seriously hurt. Obviously, train safely, guys. But when you kind of add that element in, as opposed to machines, I find that it triggers more of a strength gain because it triggers something primal in you. Obviously, I don't know if this is backed by science, but this is just my personal observation as a coach for 7 years. So always prioritize free weights when it comes to building strength. Okay, so some good movements for this are deadlift, squat, and their variations, bench press, heavy overhead press, bent over row. Basically all the barbell lifts, you just want to push heavy. You want to achieve that 80% of 1 rep max limit and really exercise the ability of your nervous system to command your body. Now, heavy strength training builds force, like we covered, but it does not automatically restore speed, okay? You can get strong, but still be slow. Now, slow strength, like we covered, more of that positional, that old man strength, it doesn't fade very fast. But power, which is explosiveness, right? Strength expressed with velocity declines much faster. And that's what I'm going to get into in this next section. The next quality we're going to talk about is power and speed. Now, what's the difference between power and strength? Strength, like we covered in the previous section, it's your ability to generate force independent of time. Power, on the other hand, is your ability to generate force while still being explosive with velocity, with speed. It's your dynamic athletic output. Think explosive punches, jumps, changes of direction, sprint speed. It's really what gives you that wow factor when it comes to physical feats. And it's the quality that actually matters in real life physical situations. And like we covered in that previous section, it declines much faster than strength. The main reason why people lose power after their 20s is they simply just stop doing this type of work after their high school sports season ends. Right? A lot of times we get older and we kind of just do your traditional, gym bro weight training split. And we're not really working our ability to use power to be explosive. And as a result, the connective tissue that is required for this explosive movement disappears. And also the neural machinery for explosive effort is lost. Now, a little bit more specifics into what actually gets lost with age, right? So power requires your nervous system to recruit the right motor units and fire them at a high frequency very fast. And this is distinct from that slow grinding maximal strength. Aging directly degrades the machinery that causes your nervous system to fire fast. And we lose things called fast twitch motor units and fast twitch muscle fibers. And as a result, our rate of force development drops. So basically, we need these fast twitch fibers to do a lot of the movements that require a lot of force fast. Okay, so a program that never challenges these fast twitch fibers with high velocity or high intent efforts leaves this adaptation largely untouched. Not only is time and aging degrading these fast twitch fibers, but if you're not using them, it's just going to accelerate that process. So you can look at this graph here. These are two types of movements. The purple one is more of your traditional weightlifting, maximal grinding out strength, where something like a deadlift, right? You have a lot of time to achieve that peak force output. Something like this orange one is what we want to focus on when we want to preferentially target those type 2 fast twitch fibers. This type of movement, you're producing a lot of force fast, and something like a jump, something like a power clean, you want to do things where you're really trying to explode and really send it, right? The next aspect of why we lose power and explosiveness, this one's not really talked about as much. It's because the body can't store, return, and release energy. Okay. Even if your nervous system fires perfectly, right? Let's say your nervous system can generate a lot of force fast. Power must still transmit through the muscle tendon system. Okay. Athletic movement isn't just pure tension. You have to learn how to move your body in a way like a whip. You relax, load, and release. A lot of athletic movement isn't about how hard you can contract, right? It's about how well you can relax, how well you can, load the muscle and release, all in a smooth motion, okay? All athletic movements use what they call the stretch shortening cycle. And basically what this is, it's a muscle action that is different from, your traditional weight training exercises. The stretch shortening cycle is anytime where you relax into a loaded position and immediately explode into an explosive contraction. It's a different type of muscle contraction, and you need to know how to use it. And your body has to be loose enough, elastic enough to let force transmit through the whole chain. Okay. And the thing is, most men nowadays are so tight from bodybuilding style training that they've lost this quality entirely just to transmit force, to relax, to just be loose, to generate power. Okay. Most men nowadays, this is what they look like. They're chronically tight, right? Tight from all the bodybuilding training, causing their muscles to be short. And this is going to restrict their joints, shorten their fascia, and it's going to result in more grinding, more stiff movement. As opposed to someone that is, more supple and elastic and just more loose in general. Their posture is optimal. They have supple fascia. They have mobile joints, and they can really relax and explode out of positions. One of my favorite examples to illustrate this is the act of punching. Now, I ran into a lot of strong individuals in the past where they're very strong on weights, but they just don't know how to punch. And the reason why, and it doesn't even matter if it's for punching, jumping, or any type of athletic movement, the reason why a lot of strong individuals still are not athletic or explosive is because power is just as much about relaxing as it is about contracting. You can be as strong as you want, but if your body is not able to relax, is not able to transmit force effectively throughout the whole chain, right? You're not going to be explosive, right? Another example, you can't jump high from a stiff position. If you really want to jump high, right, you have to relax into a loaded position and immediately explode out of that loaded position, right? So you have to learn how to use momentum, learn how to relax, learn how to be loose, and use your body like a whip. And a lot of men just don't know how to relax their body, number one. And number two, they're very stiff from a lot of bodybuilding training, so they never get to develop that whip aspect of movement. Okay, so how do we combat the loss of power and explosiveness as we get older? Let's start with that neural side. So your ability to recruit motor units fast. Okay, these are the best ways. Number one is explosive compound lifts. So you have to move more with violent intent, right? Obviously, we covered those exercises where you're kind of doing that slow grinding type strength. You have to do those same compound lifts where your goal is to send it, okay? Fast movement training, okay? You really need to recruit those motor units and recruit them fast, okay? So you have to move more with violent intent. The second way, it's kind of similar to the first method, but it's concentric only movements. Now, this is one of my favorite ways to really work on that rate of force development. Think dead start deadlifts, where you're just starting with that dead weight on the floor. Think pin squats, pin presses, where you don't lower the weight. It's already loaded. It's already lowered for you. All you have to do is just push it as hard as you can. Now, this is movements where you're going from a complete stop, and you put all your effort into just exploding that weight up. And what I really like about this is it ignores everything else. It ignores, you lowering the weight, and it just allows you to focus all of your energy on literally accelerating that weight as fast as you can. So it isolates rate of force development. Okay. And the third way to combat it is ballistic movements. Now, what are ballistic movements? Ballistic movements are anything where you have to actually propel the weight or your body. So think about something like a back squat, right? Like you're going to go down, you're going to come up. You could do that with explosive, violent intent, but it's not a ballistic movement because you never really fully propel anything, okay? You're just kind of squatting the weight down and explosively moving it up. The thing about those explosive compound lifts is that you could be as explosive as you want out of the hole. You're still dedicating that last 25% of that rep, especially at the top, to decelerating that weight. So you're not really getting a full send anything. A ballistic movement is something where you've literally just get a full sense something. So compare a back squat to something like a jump squat, where you squat down and you explode up, but you don't stop at the top, you just keep going. Or something like a Olympic style lift where you have to propel the barbell. Now, this is a big caveat with power training. Power must be trained when fresh, okay? The reason why is fatigue slows motor unit firing rates. So a lot of times I see a lot of people trying to do explosive work, but they don't really take the dedicated rest period. And what you're doing then is you're just doing cardio at that point. You're not really targeting those fast twitch fibers. You need to be well rested so that you can maximally recruit those fast twitch fibers. So make sure to take your rest. I would say, depending on the movement, you want to take about 3 minutes of rest. Now, how to combat the elastic side of things. Now, this is your body's ability to relax, receive weight, contract, and kind of be loose and be elastic so that power can transmit through the system. Now, there's a lot of different ways that power can transmit through your body. I'm going to be focusing on 2 ways. Number 1 is through the ground. So anything where, you're jumping on the ground or you're sprinting, anytime you're impacting the ground hard, right? You have to learn how to absorb force from the ground and allow that to travel throughout your full body in a smooth movement. So my favorite exercises for this are like plyometrics with multiple cycles. So think about things like running, bounding, hopping, skipping, movements with back-to-back cycles. These train you to immediately relax, land, absorb that ground impact, redirect, propel through the air, and allow that energy to flow throughout your whole system. And the tendons learn how to store and bounce energy efficiently. So anything like a hurdle jump where you have to explode, land, go immediately after again. These are going to give you a lot of reps using that stretch shortening cycle in this plane to just continually absorb force, explode, come back down, as opposed to something like a single jump where you just jump and then land. This is not really exercising that ability for you to be elastic, be loose, and transmit force effectively throughout the full body. The other way that you have to learn how to transmit force throughout the body is not only just in this plane, but anytime you're rotating. Okay, so the second mandatory elastic pattern is rotation, and it's specifically explosive rotation. So think med ball rotational throws, explosive punches, in sequence, rotational jump variations, swing patterns. These train the body to go from full relaxation to violent rotational contraction, loading the hips, obliques, and kinetic chain, and immediately going back and forth, right? So just like you need to be elastic and be able to just go through multiple cycles of you in this plane, you have to learn how to rotate and be smooth and be able to go back to back in explosive efforts rotationally, okay? So one of my favorite examples of this is someone like Ilya Topuria. If you guys see this guy fight, masterful striker, he's able to throw large, very powerful punches, rotate his upper body by a large amount, and then completely rebound and not get thrown off balance as he's throwing these punches. Okay, that is all him being very skilled in the art of punching, obviously, but he knows when to contract, when to relax. He knows how to load each side. It's reactive stiffness, full kinetic chain coordination, and just him learning how to use speed and deceleration and just being a master at this rotational movement. Now, the elastic mechanism of you just being able to effectively transmit force throughout the body depends on you being able to move freely and relax through full ranges, right? Power leaks out of every joint that's restricted. A stiff hip, a locked ankle, a body that can't flow. A whip that can't bend effectively is not a whip, it's a stick. So a lot of power is actually going to be dependent on your movement and mobility, which is a segue to my next section here. The last aspect that we're going to cover and what you lose as you age is movement and mobility. Now, this is where everything comes together. Movement and mobility govern how much power you can transmit and how you can show up physically in your daily life. It's not about stretching, it's about staying springy, fluid, and reflexively capable. So what actually gets lost as you get older as it regards to movement, okay? Restricted range of motion limits your ability to move in multiple planes. The hips and the shoulders, I find, as people age, are probably the two areas where you lose the most range of motion. But beyond just the range, the body loses that full body integration that is responsible for, generating power, like we covered in that last section. The fascia, which is the connective tissue web that links everything together in your body, right? Muscle, bone, it links everything together, adapts to a sedentary lifestyle or single dimensional training. A lot of times people just, work their sedentary jobs, go to the gym, do their kind of seated machines. And over time, your connective tissue, the thing that encapsulates everything in your body, adapts to that shape. Okay. It becomes dense, stuck, and less supple. Without diverse, multi-directional movement, the whole system stops communicating fluidly. The result, you're going to move more slowly, more mechanically, and rely more on grinding muscular effort instead of reflexive reactive coordination, which, like we covered in that last section, is imperative for transmitting force efficiently. So you're going to lose the quality of movement, not just the quantity of it. So what exactly gets lost as we age as it regards to movement? Like I said, range of motion measurably declines, especially in the hips and shoulders. But it's really the quality of movement, the fluidity, the elasticity, the springiness, the ability to relax into and out of positions. What you're going to notice as people get older is movement goes from springy and reactive to stiff and a lot of effort. So think about running, for example. When you're younger, you can kind of spring through running. It's very effortless. It's very smooth. As you get older, you're using more muscular effort as opposed to momentum, as opposed to just the looseness and elasticity of your body. And it almost looks like you're muscling through running. It looks like almost like a weight training exercise, right? So you're going to find that more muscle, less elasticity happens. Men often get more muscularly developed with age while losing the elastic fluid qualities they had as kids. Conventional muscle training enhances contractile power, but the elastic energy storing qualities of connective tissue require different demands entirely. Traditional lifting builds the motor, but never trains the spring, right? You're going to notice, like, when you're kids, you're very flexible, you're very bendy because you haven't, built that much muscle mass yet, but your body is mostly, it's fascially driven. It's not muscularly driven. So when you're a kid, you're able to move very fluidly. You're able to go through all these extreme ranges of motions. And as we get older, we kind of lose that capability. And especially if you're someone that lives a sedentary life and strength trains in a very single dimension way, you're going to lose that elastic, that fluidity as you get older, right? And I think the biggest factor, again, and you're going to find a common theme throughout all these things, is going to be disuse. Muscles and fascia adapt to the length and range they're held at most often. So that means that if you live a sedentary lifestyle, if you're someone that just sits down all day, you're going to chronically shorten your hip flexors and hamstrings. If the majority of your training is seated, stationary, or only in one plane of movement, you're going to lose the reflexive, elastic nature of your body. Your lifestyle is your mobility protocol for better or for worse. So this is how you counter it, okay? So the common theme of every countermeasure for lack of mobility and movement is you can't lift your way to fluid movement. You have to move your way there. Varied, springy, playful, multi-directional. So number one is going to be plyometrics, like we kind of covered in that last section: bouncing, hopping, skipping, jumping, rebounding. During these movements, muscle fibers contract almost isometrically while elastic elements lengthen and shorten like a spring. This directly restores that elasticity and preserves fast twitch function and rate of force development. Another thing is rotational range of motion. Okay, the body needs to be comfortable twisting, rotating, and moving in the transverse plane, not just pushing and pulling in straight lines. So you got to move through all these different types of plane. You have to be comfortable in all these types of movement. A lot of people, they kind of focus on the sagittal plane, which is anything that happens back and forth. Think bench press, think squats, think deadlifts. Some people include some frontal plane movements, things like, side bending, lateral lunges, things like that. Not many people include transverse movements. So you have to, allow your spine to learn how to move through all these planes of motion and be comfortable there, owning these positions. Next is flow training and movement variability. So do more training where, it's not like your traditional weight training, extreme slow motion training, micro movements, right? Unfamiliar positions, animal flow type movements, rope flow, whatever. There's a lot of different unconventional training methods out there, using a steel club. Try to really increase the variability of your movement. Don't be in a box when it comes to, the movements that you do in the gym. Another thing is sport and gymnastic type movement. Play with a goal, right? Do a lot of sports where you're not really, you're not really thinking about the things that you do, right? Be reactive, unpredictable, full range of motion, cutting, reaching, landing, adjusting, loaded full range strength training. So don't just go into your average ranges of motion. Explore different types of ranges of motion. Go deeper into the ranges of motions that you're doing. Go into more unconventional ranges of motion. There's a lot of type of movements in the gyms where like people neglect things like hip abduction, hip adduction, a lot of shoulder mobility stuff, right? Do these with weights, load these positions. And lastly, just move more and play. I think a lot of adults, especially as they get older, they kind of just get too serious and they just kind of like, get in this mind state of like just being too rigid, and it's a mental state and it's also a physical state. Just move more. Don't lose that kid side of yourself and just get out there and, just play around as well. So that's pretty much the whole presentation here. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do all these things, you can stay dangerous and capable for a lifetime. If you guys resonated with this video and you want one-on-one help implementing these principles into a specific system for you, go ahead and book a call in the description. Otherwise, I'm gonna see you guys on the next one.